I'm going to turn the microphone over now to the Reverend Jim Todd. Jim is a superintendent in the Eastern Pennsylvania Annual Conference and a member of our board, and somebody whose heart is in the right place. And I have found in our previous two summits that this type of panel has helped us center on why we're here. It's important for us not to talk about those who are poor and living in difficulty, but to be with folks and to learn from them and to change when needed our language, our behaviors, and even sometimes our theology. So with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Jim. We have until an hour before this, so we have some time. And Jim, mic's yours.
Thank you very much, Steve. It's good to be here with you all tonight, and I'm very honored to be with this panel up here. These are people that I have just met within the last couple of hours, and I've heard a little bit of their story, and each of their stories is very powerful, and I think you're going to be moved by their stories as well this evening. And this is not going to be a debate, really not even so much a discussion, more of a conversation among ourselves up here. And you have an opportunity to listen in on it, and then you also will have a chance to ask some questions. So if you want to jot down some notes about some things that you hear, please do so. So our conversation is going to really begin just with people telling their story, who they are, where they live now, what it is that they do, what they'd like to share in terms of their perspective about poverty, how they've observed it in their own lives, perhaps, in the lives of their neighbors, in the neighborhoods where they live. And then we also, at the very end, also want to talk about some practical ideas that they have for how each of us can be involved in solving some of the systemic issues with poverty. So I'm first going to start by introducing our panel. Starting to my left and your right, we have Barbara Veio. Is it Veio or Veio?
Veio.
Veio, okay. And she lives here in the Harrisburg area, and she's going to be talking a little bit about some of the demographics of Allison Hill, which is one of the poorer areas in the Harrisburg area. Seated immediately to my left is Ned Smith. He's with the Catholic Workers House. Is that the name of it? Okay. He works with the marginalized also in the Allison Hill neighborhood. Seated to my right, your left, is Candace Davis. And Candace, you are from Delaware?
Yes.
Okay. And she's going to tell us a little bit about her work with the poor and whatever of her own personal journey she wants to share as well. And then seated next to her is Nicole Williams, who has been part of the Circles program. And if you were here last year, you heard a lot about that. Nicole lives in Allegheny County. And then at the far end of the table is Dale Brooks, former truck driver who has suffered some medical issues and is now disabled. He's also living in Allegheny County. He's been an advocacy worker for the poor for many years, and he's involved in the Circle program as well. So again, thank you all for agreeing to do this tonight and to be vulnerable in sharing your story. And I'd like to start first with Barb. If you can kind of give us some context here and share something about your life and how you got involved in this, and then something that we need to know about Allison Hill.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you, everyone on the panel. Thank you all for being here. It's a real privilege to be here and to share with you about the work that I feel very passionately about. I was born and raised in a very rural area of Pennsylvania, and I grew up rural poor. But I learned that that's quite different from being poor in the city. There are a lot of differences. Although we were poor, without much money in the country, the one thing that we did always have was food, because the neighbors and the farmers around always made sure that they helped their neighbors and people were able to eat. So food was never really an issue, which is quite different when you work in the inner city. Food is an issue. And I'll get back to that. But I did grow up poor, without money. But I wasn't poor because we had something, again, that people in the city don't have. We had a car. And you know, if you want to live without something in your life, try living without your car or thinking about it and how limited you are without transportation. As a poor person growing up in a rural area, we still were able to go places. You know, we visited cities. We didn't go a lot of places, but we were able to reach beyond our little boundaries. And so our world was a little bigger than just that community we lived in because of that. Later in my life, after I raised my children, and 6 daughters, by the way, and the fact that you can still walk and talk after that is amazing in itself, but they're wonderful. And so after that, I got into the work world, and I'll reduce it very simply. I kind of worked my way up through the ranks on different jobs, and I ended up being the personal assistant to Lieutenant Governor Catherine Baker Knoll. Some of you from the western part of the state, I'm sure, are quite familiar with her, and others as well. And Catherine was a wonderful role model for me. Catherine was an elected official, but she was a public servant. And she taught me a lot about what it means to reach out to people, to use what you have to help others. And it's something she did in her life every day. She gave her money quite generously, but she gave her time. And she was kind. She was kind to every person she ever met. It didn't matter if we went in to the most expensive restaurant in Philadelphia. Catherine, much to the bane of the people who traveled with her, would always go to the kitchen and thank the chef and thank the people who cooked the meal for their sacrifice so that she could eat well. And she did that everywhere she went, and it was a great lesson for me because I learned how important everyone is, how important their role is. And it may be someone who brings you your drink of water, but you know what? If you're thirsty, that's pretty important. And you need to thank that person for what they do every day and be grateful that God gave you water. So as I progressed, I left that job because Catherine passed away, as many of you probably know. And then I retired. And that was the first of many retirements for me. I'm sure others have been like that too. I've learned that retirement is not a word that's in the Bible because basically what God wants us to do is retire to something. You may retire from a job that you've had all your life, but He expects you to retire to something else. And many times that's serving your fellow man. And I think that that's wonderful that as we get older, we have that opportunity and that freedom to serve in that way. So after a brief hiatus, I was asked to come to another political job in a role that I was very familiar with because it was basically what I did for the lieutenant governor for 8 years. And that was to work with the mayor in the city of Harrisburg. Now, I took that job, and I lasted 18 months. And I thought that was amazing. That was a very difficult challenge and a very different kind of challenge. And so I determined at one point that it was best for me to leave that position, and I did so. So I retired again. So after about 4 months, I was getting kind of antsy, and my husband said, "You may want to look for a part-time job." And so I went on Craigslist, and I saw a part-time job, and I went to a church in Harrisburg on Allison Hill, and I started to work there as a secretary. And for the first time in my life, I had been born and raised on the West Shore, lived many places in those intervening years. But I learned what poverty was about when I went to work in Allison Hill. And I met many people who, they're poor, but they have hope. And they have hope because there are people that work on a daily basis to try to provide that kind of hope through them. People like all of you in this room that give so generously. And so what I learned about this area was that it was the highest poverty area, and I'm not going to bore you with statistics, but that area is the highest poverty area in the city of Harrisburg. I will just throw out a few numbers to you so that I can lead into the latest study that was done there. In the city of Harrisburg, there are 48,950 people according to the latest census. 31.7% are Caucasian, 54.8% are black, and 11.7% of Hispanic. As far as housing, there is 84.6% of the housing is habitable. There are 8,703 houses that are owned. 11,858 are rented. That means that there is 57.7% of the population that are renters in Harrisburg. So that means there is no that is one of the things that exacerbates the all of the tax incomes and so on to the city and the school district because of the lack of home ownership. Just to put that into perspective, like I said, 57.7% are renters. Across the nation, the average is 33.8%. There are 3,753 vacant homes. And I don't know if Ned would agree with me, but it seems like about 3,000 of those are in Allison Hill. I know that's not the number, but there are a lot of vacant and decaying homes in the Allison Hill area. 23.4% of the families in Harrisburg are below the poverty level, and nationally it is 9.2%. So that will give you some idea of what the problems are in this Allison Hill neighborhood. A recent study that was just done, and I want to get into this housing issue if I may, and I won't take up too much time. But one of the things is, if people are going to feel as if they're community and as if they're really a part of a neighborhood, a lot of that would be helped if they actually owned the properties or felt some kind of investment in the neighborhood and in the property or the area where they live. And one of the things they found when they did this survey, they asked people, if you could afford a house here, would you want to live in this neighborhood? And the reasons why and why not. And I thought that as we put this information into the computer, I was kind of surprised because I fully expected that, I know the answer. They're going to say they don't want to live here because of crime, right? That was not correct. One of the things, while crime was third or fourth on the list, the primary was the condition of the neighborhood, the trash in the neighborhood, the fact that it was not a pleasant place to live, that it was demoralizing to walk out your door and see all the soda cups and all the trash and all the garbage on the street corners and everywhere. And so that was first. Secondary, and that had risen like 4% since the last survey was taken. The lack of affordable homes, of course, because the homes that are there, most of them are rented, like we said, and the ones that are available are not affordable to the people that live there. The cleanliness of the streets, like I said, was huge. Then we get into quality of life issues, things like the schools in the neighborhood, the parks, those kind of things that many of us take for granted. Many people choose where they're going to live based on the quality of the school district and so on. And this is not something that they have. And the school district there is very much in flux, I'm sure, as you all know. Kindergarten was threatened to be canceled all during the summer, and then it was reinstated in the fall with half-day kindergarten. So it's a very inflexible, or a place where people don't know from one day to the next, so can I go to work and my child will be in kindergarten, or do I have to find alternatives? It's very, very fluid what goes on, and that doesn't lead people to feel very safe in the area where they are. And that leads me into safety. And one of the things they said, yes, the crime is an issue there, but the feeling overall was if the neighborhood were cleaned up, if some of these houses were torn down, that a lot of the perpetrators, like drugs, things like that, would move out of the neighborhood, and then it could be reclaimed by the people that live there. So cleaning up was extremely important to the people. The other thing, of course, is access to employment, and that gets me back to where I started with transportation. One of the huge things that we confront, and that everyone confronts when they live in the inner city, is transportation issues. It's very difficult to accomplish what you want to do, whether it's looking for a job, going to the grocery store, being able to get rid of your trash, whatever it is. When you think about those, getting your children places to school, to activities that they may want to be involved in, when you think about all those things, think about what you do in your daily life, how many times you climb in your car and go to do something. For a person that may live in South Allison Hill area, for a mom there, that let's say she has 2 children and she's a single mom, and she wants to do a simple thing like get diapers. Well, if she goes to a neighborhood store, she's probably going to pay twice as much out of the small amount of money that she has for those diapers than if she had transportation to go to Walmart or some place, or had a choice of where she could purchase that product. That's not a choice that one would tend to have. Apart from that, you have to have money either for a cab or to get on the bus in order to accomplish that feat, to get milk or something for your family. So transportation is huge, not just for as far as a job issue, to get back and forth to a job or to look for a job, but just to exist on a day-to-day level.
Okay.
And I think that's what I learned most about going there, that the things that I took so much for granted every day in my life were just a difficult hill to climb for those that live in that area.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barb. You've really outlined for us the challenges of living in a poor area. And this is not a poor area in some other country or even some other state, but it's right here, very close to where we are right now. Thank
Yes,
you.
Jim.
And let's not move too far away from Allison Hill. I'd like to turn next to Ned for his perspective and tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Glad you're gathering with these themes in mind and trying to live out the gospel. I've been in Allison Hill for 16 years. Our house opened in 96, and it kind of started out as a recovery house, halfway house kind of a thing. And then gradually, as we got to know the neighborhood, it evolved into having like a little food bank and a clothing ministry and a little furniture ministry. And it's a ministry of presence, so people come to the house with various needs and sometimes just needing a ride here or there, what have you. And we eat lunch at the soup kitchen that our church operates 6 days a week, and there's community hours up the street from us Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So you get to know a lot of people that way. And last week, a fellow named Ronnie, he's like in his early 50s, died. And I've known him for years, but he's one of many people that live this quiet desperation. And he'd been on dialysis for as long as I've known him from abusing drugs. And, that's a big commitment of getting to the hospital for, transfusions and all that kind of a thing. And his live-in partner is addicted to drugs as well, and works the streets with hustling. And they're both nice people, you know what I mean? But just they're caught up in a certain scenario that is it's very unhealthy. And like with his illness getting worse, you just kind of see the spiral of degradation and like even abusing drugs more to deal with. But, you see a lot of people that are just caught in a really desperate kind of a scenario, and it's easy to turn to substances or what have you for some sort of relief. And we have an adopt-a-lot behind our house from the city of Harrisburg. And to the east side of that lot, there's 30, 40, 50 people a day hang out there drinking, smoking crack. And these are like middle-aged to elderly people. And it's not just, you can't blame the individual. It's a cultural phenomenon. And a number of the guys are Vietnam vets, and some of the guys have told me they still can't face what they experienced there. And, they're still processing the trauma all those years ago, So it's a very traumatic kind of a place. I don't judge anybody. And, just know anyone in that circumstance could find themselves caught up in the things that people are caught up in. So I don't want to go on and on. But I've kind of like thrown out my concepts of the poor and my ideas and ideologies and try to just accept people where they're at, but recognizing this cultural phenomena, especially not only in the inner city, but the poverty throughout the country and the same kinds of things that are spawned from the poverty. There was a good program on Bill Moyers recently with Chris Hedges, who used to write for the New York Times as a war correspondent. And he has a new book out that looks at 4 different communities, all very much afflicted by poverty, but by like corporate entities like doing mountaintop removal, polluting the streams in Appalachia, in Immokalee, Florida, with migrant workers and just the health consequences on the people and how easily exploited they are. Camden, New Jersey was another one, just with the manufacturing base ripped out from under the people, and now it's all bars and saloons and drug shops all throughout the place, and that's what people have turned to just out of desperation, So I don't want to go on and on. Other people have to share too, but
we appreciate your very personal story here, and this obviously is very personal to you. These are people that you know, that you've grown very close to. And I guess just a quick question before we move on. How do you take care of yourself, being right in the middle of this every day and dealing with these grinding problems, I guess you could say?
Epsom salt baths and prayers.
Okay. Yeah, I know Lorenza said that she gets away every few months for a spiritual retreat. Are you able to ever really
My sister was married yesterday up in Scranton, so I got away for a couple of days, and that was nice.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Ned. You asked to go last, so I'm not purposely skipping you, but that was at your request, Candace. So let's go down to the other end of the table to Dale. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your story as much as you care to, please?
Well, I'm the gentleman that spoke before me. I fully understand to the fact that I am a Vietnam veteran. And I have to apologize. It's going to take me a little while to get my words together. I had a stroke recently. And I was thrown into a poverty situation because of my health. Growing up, I was in poverty, and I fought my way out. So far this year, and I say so far, I have had 2 mild heart attacks and a mini stroke. I had gone from being able to make a good living to depending upon the government to help me. I am struggling still. I brought my friend with me. But I haven't given up, and I still have a past history that is hard to forgive, and I do appreciate being asked to be part of this panel and all the members of it, and I hope something we say motivates you to actually doing something. We're up here because we want to be up here, And I can't speak for everybody on this panel because I want to move forward. But if the people that could help me move forward doesn't understand, then no one's going to move forward. I was a truck driver, and before that I was a fireman. And before that I was a medic. So I've seen what disasters could do for people. And since I was thrown into this poverty, I have not lost my dignity, and I'm not afraid to say I can't do it. Is there someone that can help me? I'm not the traditional strong male. I'm just someone who needs help, and if it helps me move forward to get out of the situation I'm in, I am not going to deny it. And thank you for your time.
Okay. Because you are a veteran, you do have access to the Veterans Administration and some of the benefits that they offer.
Yes.
How much of a help has that been to you in your circumstances?
When I lived in Crawford County, if I needed to see a doctor for any type of surgery, I would have to get up real early to take a van to Erie, the city of Erie. And from there, I'd have to get in another van that almost drove right by my front door to get to Pittsburgh. And at the end of the day, instead of them stopping at my front door, I had to go all the way to Erie to come back. So it does have benefits. But if you have to travel 90 more miles, it's the benefits aren't really worth that. And even people in the VA system, doctors in the VA system, really don't understand a lot of the situations. I had a doctor recently ask me why I had a stroke. Not what caused it, but why did you have one? And it just proves that people with alphabet soup behind their name really doesn't always have the common sense.
Yeah. I guess the question I'm almost afraid to ask, but I'll ask it anyway, is if you didn't have the VA as kind of your safety net and your backstop, what else would you have in your situation if you were not a vet? Can you even imagine?
Actually, it took a while for the VA system to take over when I got back from Nam. And it basically was, walk-in clinics that were being supported by the different churches in the area, soup kitchens. I have slept under bridges. I have slept near railroad trains. I have been in on homeless shelters, But what helped me with the medical is when I lived and came to Pittsburgh, East Liberty Medical was being supported by or helped with the surrounding churches, and they would not turn anybody away even if they didn't have any insurance. They would make sure that your health needs were taken care of. Some of the drop-in centers in that area would have clinics once a week or so often where the medical staff would come out, and if you couldn't afford the medications, they had vouchers with the different drugstores in the area to help you with those things.
All right. Thank you very much, Dale.
Thank you.
And Nicole, I think you already know Dale a little bit because you live in the same area. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're pretty good friends.
Pretty good friends, okay. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your story, please?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to you. I too, live in poverty right now. I was 15 years old, homeless, nowhere to go. So I didn't get a chance to like finish school or anything. I had to survive any way I could. And a lot of it was working in a restaurant. Somebody gave me a job cleaning up at first, but then they realized that I could cook. So of course, they had me cooking. And, I'm not ashamed to say it, but I had a room. I ended up getting a room and a bathroom, no kitchen. So I couldn't eat or anything unless I worked at the restaurant. And I quit school. I quit school in the 12th grade. Well, going on further, I ended up meeting some people at Pitcairn Church, United Methodist Church. And I ended up, I'm older now, and I met them, and there was a program started called Circles. Well, the Circles program, they invited me in with open arms, and was willing to help me. But I had some other things going on, of course, and I quit. And I quit because I started using drugs. And when I started using drugs, one thing that the Circles program always taught me is that you can't use drugs and be a part of getting ahead because you can't focus on both. So I quit on my own. But then when I was ready, when God allowed me to, He delivered me from using drugs. And I called them at the church and let them know that I needed some help. And they came and got me. They came and got me and rescued me. And they took me to the church and they fed me and they gave me something to drink. And they helped me get into a rehab. And I ended up in a rehab. Now I have a little over a year clean.
Amen.
And but of course, I'm still living in poverty. But one of my goals is to go back to school and get my GED. There's a lot of programs that shut down helping older people. I'm 43 years old now. And there was programs that went from 18 to 24. And if you're not 24, then they won't help me get my GED. So, it costs pretty much, it costs money. And I need pre-classes so that I can get my brain refreshed so that I can go and take the GED test. And I know that the GED test is like $60, but I know the church would help me if I asked them, but I don't really ask them for much. And I travel quite a distance. I catch 3 buses to get to the church every Wednesday. And I go to the church every Wednesday for the Circles program. I was in the Getting Ahead part and I graduated. Now I'm a circle leader. And so it's been very rewarding for me. And there's other people that went through getting their GED. Now they're in college, so they're like a hope shot for me. I know that I can do it, but I just need some help. And I'm just learning how to read also. It's been about 4 years now I've been learning how to read. So there was a lot of big words on the singing part. And if I don't understand how to say it, I'm really not going to understand what it means. So I couldn't follow along. But I followed along whatever I could. And there's people at the church also that's going to help me, and the Circles program that's going to help me. I have an ally that works with me hand in hand Joan is one of the allies, and she also helps me. She's like a mother figure for me, and she supports me in everything. Like, they support me in everything. And also, I just got engaged recently, and I'm getting married, and my fiance is going to school to study to be a pastor. So I know that this is God moving in my life, and I know that through Him I can accomplish anything.
Thank you. That was inspiring. I want to just briefly come back to something you said a couple of minutes ago. You touched on this. You talked about programs that have been shut down. And I'd like to ask you, since we're almost in shouting distance to Harrisburg here, if you could shout at our legislators over there and say, either don't cut this because it's so effective for poor people, or restart this one because you already did cut it. What are some of those programs that you would like to see going because you can personally see how much they've helped you and other people in your position?
The literacy program. Like, I need help with reading and things like that. And I don't think that they should be cut because there's people like me that's older that needs the help. And I don't have no extra money. I pay light, gas, phone, and water. Oh, I pay for water too. And I pay rent, and that's my whole check. Like, my whole check is gone. So it's just like I'm living homeless again. I'm ready to just like throw in the towel because I never have no money to do anything.
Well, we pray that you won't throw in the towel, and sounds like there are brighter days to come. You're about to get married, and we'll certainly pray for you and all of that. So thank you so much for sharing so much of your life with us. We appreciate that. And let me turn now to Candace. And you live in a different state. You live in Delaware, but there are challenges in every state in our union. And what are some of the challenges that you see, and what is it that you do, and how have you been impacted by poverty yourself? Yeah, we'll move this over for you.
I am a 22-year-old college student. I work at Connections, which is a mental health facility in Wilmington, Delaware, and I'm also a resident of Wilmington, Delaware. Homelessness or poverty, my sister was homeless for a few months, and we weren't able to take her in our home, but we were able to take in her 3 children. And that was an issue, but it kind of hurt a little bit because I wasn't able to help my sister, my blood sister. But another issue for me with poverty, it may not really be poverty, but my dad, who was a pastor in Middletown, Delaware, he passed away last year. And without his income coming into our house is going into foreclosure. And it's just my mom and myself living there now. So it is an issue for us. Kind of scary because we don't know where we're going to go, but we do believe in God and know that He is He'll make a way out of no way. And the thought that I really want to leave with you guys is this symbol right here is called Jayame, and it's actually my dad's, and it's spelled Jyeyame. Can everybody say Jayame?
Jayame.
It's actually an African symbol from the Western. Sorry, can y'all hear me? The Western Africa, and what it means is God is omnipotent and God is omnipresent. And if we just live every day and be able to tell all of mankind that God is able, and He is love. God is love, first of all, but He is able. And He's just a blessing to all of our lives. He's always omnipotent, and He's always omnipresent. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you. 2 of you up here have had sudden life changes that led to things being different in your life. Your medical issues, Dale, and you talked about your father passing away, and our condolences to you and all of your family. And I'm just wondering, when people's lives change so dramatically in situations like that, what's the best way for the church to become involved? How can a local church become involved to help a family that is going through such a traumatic situation? Dale, do you have any thoughts?
Well, one of the things I've learned, I'm in a 12-step program, and I'm coming up on 30 years of being alcohol and drug free. But one of the things I learned in that program is if you don't open your mouth, nobody's going to know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I didn't mention that I had a stroke, no one would know about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if I didn't mention that I was lacking food or money for transportation, or even little things like I don't have a pillow. You know, if you know, which sounds funny, but for 6 weeks I didn't have one. But the thing is if you don't inform anybody or let anybody into your inner circle to know these things, then nothing is going to change.
Yeah. Okay. So speak up, and hopefully the church will hear and listen and really do something. But it also seems to me incumbent on our pastors and lay people to notice when somebody is maybe not coming to church, or maybe their health has taken a dramatic turn, and to not wait until somebody like yourself comes and asks for help, but to be proactive and to offer help even before it's asked.
And in the congregation, if they see something that doesn't seem right to them, should bring it to the pastor, and have them make an initial step and say, you know, it's been brought to my attention that you don't seem to be smiling as much. Is there something going on that I should know about? You know, so that line of communication actually has to go in both directions.
Okay. What about the church and the role of advocacy? So if somebody in your situation suddenly has to apply for benefits from the state or even from a company, how helpful would it be for someone to accompany you to the Social Security office or some other place to help you fill out paperwork and that sort of thing?
Actually, that's very encouraging, because where I live in Pitcairn, if I need to go to the welfare office, that's a 2-hour bus ride one way. And the encouraging thing is if someone goes with you, and even if it's just on the bus or physically drives you there, you're not being thrown into the wheels of the system by yourself. You're not going, and it'll give you an opportunity to express the problems that you're having, because you know the whole congregation doesn't need to know. It is the pastor who you should confide in. So if that would also give you an opportunity to get to know the person who's giving you a ride. So if they see something that doesn't seem right in their eye, they could then come over and say, doesn't seem right. Is there something? You know?
Yeah, another set of eyes and ears.
Yeah, but you also have to make yourself available and realize that members of the congregation want to help you, but they can't help you unless you say, can you help me?
Yeah.
You know, and it's the same situation. I believe that God knows what I need, but until He hears me say, this is what I need, and it brings me down to the situation where I have to admit that there is a need for me, and then I have to ask for it, which shows me that there's encouragement there too, that and that's personal growth, and that gives an opportunity to get the help and actually grow more, and even though the situation now might be good.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Candace, do you have any thoughts in this arena about how the church can be involved?
I agree with Dale. If you don't say anything, nobody will know.
Gotta get right in there.
I agree with Dale. If nobody doesn't say anything, the church won't know. But I think maybe if the churches that don't have a organization for the homeless to come in or feel a part of the churches, they won't know either that they're welcome as well.
Okay.
So if we're able to maybe build some type of organization or maybe some type of organization that allows them to know that they're welcome.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's really critical. That there's some churches you walk into and it just looks like everybody's very well put together. They wear their best clothes and everybody leaves their problems at the door when they walk into church. But what we need are churches that make people feel welcome no matter what their circumstance, and always put the welcome mat out and say, if you need help, we're here to help. Okay, thank you. This is a good time to move into questions.
I might start just with, I thought I was the token Catholic, but I see we have another one here. What we didn't bring up is the Circles program and what the Methodist Church does for the Circles program in Pitcairn. Marcus and Dale and Nicole are just 3 of the people, and this year we have 15 people going through it. Marcus and Dale being them. Cindy went out and actually went through Pitcairn asking people to be allies, asking people to be on the executive board. She has councilmen, she has mayors, she has people from the businesses. My husband and I have been members since we were at the beginning of the program. It is from joy and love of the Methodist Church, and me as a Catholic, yes, I love them. And I love Cindy for seeing what this community needs. They need to take these people out of poverty, one family at a time. And Cindy started the program, and she keeps it going. She never stops working for it, or for the community, or for her church. I'd like you to give Cindy a big hand of applause.
Thank you very much. Okay, Barb, why don't you make another comment, maybe get the discussion?
I'd just like to make a comment, if I may, and maybe turn the discussion a little bit to a comment that you made about Cindy, and that some of these other folks have made, that she went out into the neighborhood and found people that was willing to do this program. And I'd like to say thank you for that, because I think that is so important. I think that I've heard some people say, they came through the doors and they got help, or I think you referred to the fact that maybe people are afraid to ask for help because everyone, when they walk into a church, looks like they have it together and everything. And I think the point is that we need to step outside the doors of the church, that we need to stop thinking of it as this box. And we need to go and work outside that box. And when we see people that are hurting, that we reach out to them. It isn't a matter of waiting until they come to us. The Lord has given us a heart, and He's giving us the ability, and He gives us what we need to see the needs of another person. We just need to say yes, and not to be too busy and hurry by, and to not really interact with people that we see are hurting. And I think if we do that and then bring them to the church where they can get further help, we can't do everything, but we can do something, according to the Reverend Fowler. And I think that is so important to learn, that while we can't do it all, that person that we see, we may be the only one that sees that person hurting. And if we walk away, maybe there's not another person that's going to reach out to them. It's our responsibility in God's eyes to do that. That's what He's placed us here to do. And I think thinking outside the box and going outside the church itself and interacting with people is just such a part of who God wants us to be.
Okay. Thank you, Barb.
I have a question for Barb and Ned. Much of the issues of poverty really need systemic changes in our community, and the only ones that can really affect these systemic changes are the politicians, the community leaders. And I'm trying to work with that in my own community. With your experience in Harrisburg, in your area, do you have any suggestions or ways or avenues that can be used in order to address the systemic issues and how to convince the leaders of our communities to reduce these barriers that are being faced by people in poverty, whether it's transportation, wages, health, and so forth like that? What's any effective tools or anything of that nature that you're aware of in your circumstances?
I don't have a lot of confidence in our leaders at the moment. And I've joined Stephen at the Capitol a number of times, and I've been to the Capitol many times. Just things are so disordered and insane. And even I was at the governor's mansion a month ago. They cut general assistance, which is the only cash that some people get at all. And it's like $1.5 million, where they've given like nearly $1 billion in new tax breaks through the Delaware loopholes and stuff like this. Jesus flipped the money changers' tables over. You know, it was direct liturgical action confronting like idolatry. It's idolatry. And what they did with the mortgage crisis, what they've done with the Iraq and Afghanistan wars to the tunes of trillions of dollars that has gone unabated and unchecked and uncried about and mourned about, we're the victims of this idolatry that the church is supposed to confess and has not confessed. And the poor get crucified when these idolatries are allowed to go on and on.
I'd just like to say, as far as advocacy, if I may, having worked at the highest levels of government, sir, I can tell you that if you're looking for help there, you're probably going to be looking a long, long time. There are people that care, but it's too difficult with the way what needs to happen to get it through the chain of command, to get the money to where it's really needed and to get the help to where it's needed. I think as faith-based organizations, what we need to realize is that the help is not going to come from the government. And we need to determine that as organizations and that as individuals, we're going to do it. And we need to do that by advocating for changes in things like codes in cities so that these slumlords can no longer exist and the housing, by advocating to these people for changes. But we need, as faith-based organizations, to step up and say, we're going to have to fill this gap.
Before we get to another question, Steve, you wanted to jump in?
Sure, thank you. What I do in my ministry is that I work with legislators, the executive branch, but more importantly, what I work with is people in the church and in coalitions across Pennsylvania. And I will disagree a little bit with Barbara, because our Constitution says we the people. And our government, our leadership structures in this nation are messed up. And messed up means misery and evil side by side. Not about people as individuals, but as systems. And the way to change that is for folks like us to begin our own version of organizing, not as Republicans or as Democrats, but as people of faith, whether we're United Methodists, whether we're Roman Catholics, whether we're Jews, Muslims, Mormons, you name it. Because the principles by which we profess to believe are in a God who teaches us that our obligation before anything is to care and to serve the poor. And I have found in my work, I don't do lobbying in a traditional sense, you could say. In my background, I spent a long time in the system, and I have spent a lot of time in the past few years repenting of my sins for being part of the system, being part of those who, for political advantage, have taken advantage of the poor and have marginalized the poor to win election. And I imagine when I go to meet God someday, that will be one of the things for which I seek forgiveness, in hoping that God will forgive me for some of which I was part of perpetrating. But we can change that. We all vote. Your friends vote. And anybody who tells me that their voice doesn't count, your voice does count. It may take 1 or 2 election cycles for it to make a difference. But our leaders will listen to us. And more importantly, and this is how I try to touch hearts, I do that through prayer. I pray for our legislators. I pray publicly for legislators. I'm not afraid to stand up on the steps of the Capitol, to kneel outside and pray, and to urge others to pray. I engaged, and don't take this as me and my ego, because if it were my ego, I could be doing something else and making a lot more money for it. But by praying, by fasting, by building relationships with our elected leaders, little by little by little, we turn them. And that's how we go about it. We were a nation that was started with a revolution by people who had been felt they had been treated unjustly. We, as people of peace and of justice, can begin a similar kind of revolution, using the principles of Gandhi and Dr. King, can change hearts, can warm hearts, and change the system. I'm sorry to have spoken so long, but I think that's why we're here today. That's why tomorrow, listening when Mike Slaughter's here to talk about advocacy, what I do and what we do is all about what the Bible tells us. From the earliest prophets to the words of Christ, to stand up for those who have no voice and to change the world. And we've heard here tonight some incredible stories of people whose lives have been affected. If it doesn't touch your heart to go home and share those stories and learn of people in all of our neighborhoods, because poverty is not just in the city, then we can make that difference. Thank you for the opportunity, Jim, but I just wanted to focus on that, because it drives me. It just drives me, and when I talk to folks, when I talk to legislators, I talk about the people in their districts who are on the margins. And I talk to them, we'll talk tomorrow about some other things, but how we have that obligation. Thank you.
Wow, do we have someone with passion in the position of Director of UM Advocacy? That's for sure. We're not done yet. We do have a few more questions. You've been waiting very patiently, so please, if you would.
Last month, our minister spent the 5 Sundays of the month, preaching on the book of James. Tonight, everybody look up James chapter 2. And they say, verses 3, I think it's 4, 5, and 6, if two men walk into your church and one has I'll put it this way, a tie, a jacket, a nice ring on his finger, you say to him, oh, please come sit here in the place of honor. And the other guy comes in, and he's a poor man, and he looks raggedy, unkempt, and so forth. You say to him, oh, come, you can sit over there in the back
you can sit here on the floor. That was James, and I think he wrote that book a long time ago.
Thank you for that good reminder from Scripture.
Excuse me, I hate to interrupt you, but
No, go ahead.
I had a point, and what she had to say was really something to consider. Just because a person dressed well doesn't mean, or not dressed as well, doesn't mean that their heart isn't there. Mm-hmm. The gentleman that was spoke on earlier, if the reality is, if you go to Harrisburg, you're not going to have many people listening to you. The best place to start is the county commissioners. Start the mayor, his assistants. I did advocacy when I lived in Crawford County. It got to the point where I knocked at the door and they knew who it was. They knew my name. The only thing they couldn't tell me was my birthday. But you got to start. Because people in Harrisburg won't see what's happening in Pitcairn or Monroeville or the areas around, but the people there have no excuse why not. And go from there. And thank you.